The late afternoon sun hung low over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of Main Street. Sarah pulled her old sedan into the parking lot of the only diner in town, the engine ticking as it cooled. She stepped out, the door creaking like a whisper in the quiet, and that's when she noticed it. The faded sign above the door read, "Welcome back, Sarah." But she hadn't told anyone she was coming home. Not yet. She'd left Willow Creek 12 years ago, right after high school, chasing dreams in the city that never quite materialized. Now, at 32, with a failed marriage and a job she'd walked away from, the small town in upstate New York felt like the only place left to hide or regroup. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and distant rain, familiar enough to tug at old memories. Sarah adjusted her sunglasses and pushed open the diner's door, the bell jingling softly. Inside, the place was just as she remembered. Checkered floors, vinyl booths worn smooth from decades of locals nursing coffee. A few patrons sat scattered, farmers in flannel, a couple of retirees flipping through newspapers, but no one looked up. Not right away. The waitress, Maggie, who must be pushing 60 now, glanced over from behind the counter, her smile tight and knowing. "Sarah Hale," she said, voice carrying across the empty space like she'd been expecting her. "Table by the window?" Sarah nodded, sliding into the booth. The vinyl stuck to her jeans in the humid warmth. She ordered a black coffee, watching as Maggie poured it without asking how she took it. The diner was a hub in Willow Creek, where everyone knew your order, your family feuds, the color of your first bike. But today, the chatter felt muted, like conversations dipped into pauses whenever she glanced around. A man at the counter met her eyes for a second too long before turning back to his pie. As the coffee steamed in front of her, Sarah pulled out her phone to check messages. Nothing from her sister, Emily, whom she'd called from the road. Emily had inherited the family house after their parents passed, and Sarah was crashing there until she figured things out. The town hadn't changed much. Same single stoplight, same volunteer fire department with the rusty truck out front. Kids still biked down Elm Street after school, and the annual fair in September would draw folks from neighboring counties. It was the kind of place where secrets simmered under the surface of potlucks and Sunday services, but nothing ever boiled over. She sipped the coffee, bitter and strong, and let her mind wander to the drive-in. The highway had been empty for miles, just cornfields blurring by until the sign for Willow Creek appeared. Population 1, 247, proudly silent since 1892. She chuckled at that, some old joke about the town's Quaker roots or whatever. But as she turned onto the main drag, a pickup truck had slowed beside her, the driver tipping his hat. No words, just that nod, like he recognized her from a distance. She hadn't seen his face clearly. The bell jingled again, pulling her back. An older woman entered, grey hair pinned back, carrying a canvas bag from the grocery. She slid into a booth across the aisle, unfolding a menu she didn't need. Sarah smiled politely, but the woman stared straight ahead, lips moving as if whispering to herself, or to someone else. A faint hum started then, low and rhythmic, like the buzz of fluorescent lights, but the diner only had those old hanging bulbs. Sarah rubbed her temple. Maybe it was the long drive catching up. Maggie returned with a slice of apple pie she hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said, setting it down. "Heard you were coming." Sarah's fork paused mid-air. "Who told you?" Maggie shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Word gets around. Small town, you know." But her eyes flicked to the window, where the sun was dipping behind the hills, and she walked away without another word. Outside, the streetlights flickered on early, casting pools of yellow on the sidewalk. Sarah finished her coffee, the unease settling like sediment at the bottom of the cup. She remembered Willow Creek as chatty, full of gossip over fences and at the post office. Her parents had run the hardware store, trading stories with every customer. Now, as she paid and stepped back into the cooling air, the town felt wrapped in cotton, sounds muffled, faces averted. A dog barked somewhere down the block, sharp and isolated, then nothing. Driving to Emily's house on the edge of town, Sarah passed the familiar landmarks, the white steepled church, the library with its brick facade, the gas station where she'd pumped her first tank of gas. The road narrowed into a suburban loop, houses set back with manicured lawns and American flags fluttering lazily. Emily's place was a two-story colonial, porchlight already on, though dusk was just settling. Sarah parked in the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires, and grabbed her duffel from the trunk. The front door was unlocked, as always in Willow Creek. "Emily!" she called, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and something faintly floral. No answer. The living room was tidy, couch pillows fluffed, remote aligned just so on the coffee table. Sarah dropped her bag and wandered to the kitchen, where a note waited on the counter. "Out for a bit. Make yourself at home. Fridge is stocked. M." Simple, like always. But the handwriting looked off, the loops tighter than Emily's usual scrawl. Upstairs, her old room was unchanged. Twin bed with the quilt her mum made, posters of bands she'd outgrown. Sarah unpacked hanging clothes in the closet that still held a faint scent of cedar. As night fell, the house creaked with the wind, branches tapping the window like fingers. She lay down, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Emily and her at the county fair, arms linked, laughing. Sleep tugged at her, but something nagged, a whisper of wrongness. In the quiet she heard it, footsteps downstairs, soft and deliberate, pacing the hardwood floor. Not Emily, too measured, too patient. Sarah sat up, heart quickening, and listened. The steps paused, then resumed, circling the base of the stairs. No voice, no call, just the rhythm, like someone waiting for her to notice. She told herself it was the house settling, the town playing tricks after so long away, but deep down, in the silence that pressed against the walls, she wondered if Willow Creek had been waiting for her all along. The footsteps stopped. Outside, a car door shut in the distance, engine rumbling to life and fading down the road. Sarah exhaled, pulling the covers up. Tomorrow she'd talk to Emily, shake off the road weariness. For now, the house held its breath with her, the night stretching long and unspoken. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains, painting faint patterns on the bedroom floor. Sarah stirred, the quilt tangled around her legs from a night of fitful sleep. The footsteps, or whatever they'd been, had faded into silence eventually, leaving her to toss between half-remembered dreams of empty streets and faces turned away. She glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 8:17 a.m. Downstairs, the clatter of dishes suggested Emily was finally home. Sarah pulled on a sweater and jeans, the floorboards cool under her bare feet as she descended the stairs. The house felt brighter in daylight, the floral scent stronger now, like fresh bouquets hidden somewhere. In the kitchen, Emily stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and she wore the same faded apron their mother had favored. "Morning, sleepyhead," Emily said without turning, her voice warm but clipped, like she was reciting lines from a well-worn script. "Coffee's on. Help yourself." Sarah poured a mug, the steam rising in lazy curls. Emily was 2 years younger, always the steadier one, the one who'd stayed to tend the family roots while Sarah chased horizons. "Heard you come in late," Sarah said, sliding onto a stool at the island. "Everything okay?" Emily plated the pancakes, drizzling syrup in neat spirals. "Just a quick errand to the store. You know how it is, town's always got something needing attention." She pushed a plate toward Sarah, but her eyes stayed on the pan, scraping away a non-existent bit of batter. No questions about the drive, the divorce, the sudden return, just this routine, like Sarah had never left. They ate in companionable quiet at first. The only sounds the scrape of forks and the distant hum of a lawnmower outside. Willow Creek woke slowly on weekdays, with folks heading to shifts at the mill or the feed store, kids trudging to the elementary school on the hill. Sarah mentioned the diner sign, testing the waters. Weird thing yesterday, Maggie's place had my name on the welcome board, like they'd been expecting me. Emily's fork paused, then resumed. Small-town quirks. Probably saw your car on the highway or something. News travels fast here. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And she changed the subject to the garden out back, how the tomatoes were ripening early this year. Sarah nodded, letting it slide, but the unease from last night lingered, a subtle itch under her skin. After breakfast, Emily suggested a walk to clear the cobwebs, show you what's new, or not new really. They stepped out into the crisp air. The suburban street lined with maple trees, just starting to turn gold at the edges. Houses like theirs dotted the loop. 2-car garages, basketball hoops bolted to siding, mailboxes with family names etched in brass. A neighbor waved from his porch, pruning shears in hand, Mr. Harlan, who'd taught Sarah algebra back in high school. "Good to have you back, Sarah," he called, his voice carrying clear, but his gaze lingering a beat too long before he turned away. They strolled toward the town square, passing the park where a few seniors played checkers on picnic tables. Emily pointed out changes: the new gazebo funded by the Lions Club, the benches repainted last summer. But everything felt curated, like a postcard version of Willow Creek that skipped the undercurrents. At the post office, a line snaked out the door, folks mailing packages or picking up mail-order catalogues. Sarah waited with Emily, catching snippets of conversation. Talk of the weather, the high school football team's prospects, the price of gas at the station. No one acknowledged her directly, but heads turned, whispers trailing off as she passed. Inside, the clerk, a middle-aged woman with a name tag reading Doris, handed Emily her mail without a word. Then to Sarah, "Anything for you, dear?" Doris's smile was polite, but her eyes scanned Sarah like she was checking against an invisible list. "Not yet, I guess," Sarah replied. As they left, she noticed a bulletin board plastered with flyers. Church suppers, bake sales, a missing cat poster from 2 weeks back. Tucked in the corner was one for the annual town meeting, dated for next month, with a note at the bottom: "All residents welcome, past and present." The walk back took them past the library, its doors propped open to let in the breeze. Emily hesitated. "Want to pop in? They've got those old yearbooks you might like." Sarah agreed, more out of curiosity than interest. The place was quiet, shelves lined with paperbacks and local histories, the air cool and musty. A librarian nodded from her desk, but said nothing as they browsed the reference section. Sarah pulled a yearbook from her senior year, flipping to the candid shots, her with friends at prom, Emily cheering at a game. But as she turned the pages, something caught her eye. A photo from the homecoming parade, the whole town lined up along Main Street. There, in the background, a group of kids her age, including Emily, all smiling. Except for one detail, the sign they held read, "Welcome home, Sarah, class of '09, but she'd graduated in 2010. She blinked, checking the date stamped inside the cover, 2010 edition. Her stomach twisted. Look at this." Emily glanced over, then shrugged. "Old photos get reused sometimes. Memory lane, right?" But her tone was too casual, and she steered Sarah toward the door, mentioning lunch. Back home, Sarah couldn't shake it. She retreated to her room while Emily napped, pulling out her laptop to search for Willow Creek news. Articles popped up. Mill layoffs last year. A festival postponed due to rain. Nothing out of the ordinary. But scrolling deeper, she found a forum thread from a neighboring town dated 5 years back. "Weird vibes in Willow Creek. Folks act like they know your secrets, but zip it." Comments echoed. "Visited once, felt watched. Like the whole place is holding its breath." She closed the tab, telling herself it was bored internet chatter. Afternoon dragged into evening. Emily made spaghetti, the kitchen filling with the scent of garlic and sauce simmering on the stove. They ate on the porch, watching fireflies wink in the yard. Conversation stayed light. Recipes, old neighbors. But Sarah kept glancing at the street where cars passed slower than usual, headlights cutting the dusk. A pickup like the one from yesterday idled at the corner for a moment, then drove on. Night fell softer than the one before, stars pricking the sky over the hills. Sarah excused herself early, claiming jet lag from the trip. In bed, she replayed the day, the yearbook, the whispers, Emily's deflections. The house was still, but as she drifted off, a new sound emerged, not footsteps, but a soft murmur from downstairs. Like voices, low and overlapping, discussing something in hushed tones. Not angry, not urgent, just aware. She sat up, straining to listen. The murmurs rose and fell, punctuated by a chuckle that sounded almost familiar. Emily's room was dark across the hall, door ajar. Sarah crept to the landing, peering down. The living room lamp glowed faintly, casting shadows that danced like people in conversation. But the room was empty. No TV on, no radio, just the empty space, humming with that invisible rhythm. She retreated, heart thudding softly, and closed her door. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the gutters. Willow Creek slept, or so it seemed, but in the quiet hours Sarah wondered if the town was merely pausing, gathering words it had no intention of speaking. The murmurs faded, leaving only the echo of her own breathing, steady and alone. The next morning brought a deceptive calm, the kind that settles over Willow Creek like fog rolling off the creek bed. Sarah woke to the sound of birdsong filtering through the window, sharp and insistent, as if the world outside was determined to prove its normalcy. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead, its blades slicing the air with a soft whoosh. The murmurs from the night before felt like a dream now, half remembered and easily dismissed in the light of day. She told herself it was the house, old bones shifting, or maybe the neighbor's TV bleeding through the walls. Emily's door was still closed across the hall, a sliver of quiet emanating from within. Downstairs, the kitchen was empty, but a pot of coffee sat warming on the counter, steam escaping in thin wisps. Sarah poured a cup, the ceramic mug warm against her palms, and stepped out onto the porch. The street was stirring. A jogger in neon shorts passed by, earbuds in, eyes fixed ahead. A minivan backed out of a driveway 2 houses down, heading toward the school drop-off line, everything in its place, the suburban rhythm unbroken. She sipped slowly, watching a squirrel dart across the lawn, pausing to stare at her before vanishing into the hedges. It was almost comforting, this ordinariness, but the edges of it blurred when she thought too hard about the yearbook, the sign at the diner. Emily appeared at the back door, keys jingling in her hand. "Heading to the library for a shift," she said, her voice carrying that same measured tone from breakfast the day before. "You should come by later. It's quiet mid-morning. Might help you settle in." She didn't wait for a reply, just gave a quick wave and walked to her car, the engine humming to life before pulling away down the loop. Sarah watched her go, the tail lights disappearing around the bend, leaving the street emptier than before. She spent the morning unpacking the rest of her things, folding clothes into drawers that still held faint traces of her teenage self. Scented sachets her mum had tucked away years ago. The closet door creaked when she opened it wider, revealing a shelf of old books and photo albums she'd forgotten about. One album caught her eye, its cover faded blue with gold lettering, Family Moments, 2000-2010. She pulled it down, dust motes dancing in the beam of sunlight, and flipped through the pages. There they were, holidays at the dining table, vacations to the lake upstate, her and Emily building a snowman in the front yard, smiles all around, genuine and unforced. But as she turned to the later years, a photo from her graduation party stood out, the backyard strung with lights, neighbors milling about with plates of cake. In the corner, blurred but unmistakable, was the same group from the yearbook parade, holding a banner that read, "Sarah's Big Day, welcome back any time." Her fingers traced the letters. It was dated 2010, same as the book. Coincidence, she thought, or lazy recycling of props from town events. Still, the repetition gnawed at her, a loose thread pulling at the fabric of memory. By noon, the house felt too still, the silence pressing in from the walls. Sarah grabbed her jacket and headed out, deciding to walk to the library, as Emily suggested. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves from the maples lining the street. She passed Mr. Harlan again, this time watering his flower beds, hose spraying in a gentle arc. "Settling in all right?" he called, not looking up from his roses. "Town's missed you." His words hung there, casual but weighted, and Sarah murmured a thanks before quickening her pace. At the corner, a woman in a cardigan pushed a stroller, the baby cooing softly. She nodded at Sarah, eyes meeting for a fraction too long, then averted, as if remembering a cue. The library sat on the edge of the square, its brick walls warmed by the sun, ivy climbing one side like veins. Sarah pushed through the heavy doors, the cool interior enveloping her with the smell of aged paper and polished wood. Emily was at the circulation desk, sorting returns with efficient movements, her ponytail swaying. "Hey," Sarah said, approaching. "Figured I'd browse for a bit." Emily glanced up, her smile brief. "Reference section's got local histories if you're into that, or the fiction aisle. Plenty of mysteries." She turned back to her task, fingers flying over the scanner. Sarah wandered deeper, the shelves towering like silent sentinels. She pulled a book on upstate New York towns, skimming chapters on Willow Creek's founding, Quaker settlers, quiet values, a history of communal silence during hardships. Nothing jumped out as unusual, but the photos showed streets much like today's. Faces turned toward the camera with that same averted knowing. As she moved to the fiction row, a soft rustle caught her ear, like pages turning nearby, but out of sight. She peered around the corner, empty. Just stacks of paperbacks, spines cracked from use. Shaking it off, she selected a thriller about a woman unraveling secrets in a coastal village, close enough to her own unease, without mirroring it too closely. Settling into an armchair by the window, she read, the words blurring as her mind wandered. Outside, the square bustled mildly, a delivery truck idling at the post office, kids kicking a soccer ball in the park. But every few minutes a pedestrian would pause at the library steps, glance in through the glass, then continue on. Not staring exactly, just checking, like confirming a presence. An hour passed, the light shifting as clouds gathered overhead. Emily approached with a stack of books. "These might interest you," she said, setting them on the side table. Sarah looked down, volumes on genealogy, town archives, even a slim pamphlet titled Willow Creek, Echoes of the Past. The top one had a sticky note. "Thought you'd want to see this, M." Curiosity piqued, Sarah opened it later, after Emily returned to the desk. The genealogy book traced family lines back generations, her own included. Hales, settling in 1895, noted for their steadfast silence in community matters. A photo insert showed her great-grandparents at a town gathering, expressions serene, but eyes fixed on something off-frame. Flipping further, she found a page on recent returns, names of folks who'd left and come back, including one entry, Sarah Hale, listed as anticipated resident 2023. The date was future, inked neatly. Her breath caught. It had to be a prank, Emily's idea of a welcome joke. But the handwriting matched the note on the counter that first night, tight loops and all. The library bell chimed as patrons trickled out for lunch, leaving Sarah alone with the volumes. She closed the book, heart picking up a subtle rhythm, and stood to leave. At the desk, Emily was on the phone, voice low. "Yes, she's here, just browsing. We'll keep an eye." She hung up as Sarah approached, expression neutral. "Find anything good?" Sarah forced a nod, sliding the genealogy book across the counter. "Interesting stuff. That note. You're doing?" Emily's eyes flicked to the sticky, then back. "Helps with research. Town keeps good records." No denial, no explanation, just that. Walking home, the clouds thickened, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Sarah's steps echoed on the sidewalk, each one amplifying the isolation wrapping around her. Cars passed without honking hellos, houses with curtains drawn against the grey. At the edge of the loop, she noticed her own driveway. The sedan she'd driven in sat there, but beside it, another car, a nondescript blue sedan, parked neatly, keys in the ignition. She hadn't heard it arrive. Peering through the window, the dashboard was empty, but a faint scent of coffee lingered when she opened the door. Not hers. Inside the house, everything was as she'd left it. Kitchen counters wiped clean, no signs of intrusion. But in the living room, the photo album she'd browsed earlier lay open on the coffee table, turned to the graduation page. The banner seemed sharper now, the words, "Welcome back," almost glowing under the lamp's light. Sarah's skin prickled. She closed it, shoving it back into place upstairs, but the doubt had rooted deeper, twisting like vines. Was it Emily, playing some elaborate game to make her feel connected? Or the town itself, its silence a web of unspoken awareness, drawing her into patterns she'd only begun to sense? Afternoon rain pattered against the windows, blurring the world outside into smears of green and grey. Sarah curled up on the couch with her borrowed thriller, but the words swam, her mind replaying fragments, the pickup idling, the library glances, the future-dated entry. The house creaked under the downpour, but beneath it another sound emerged, a faint tapping at the back door, rhythmic, like knuckles rapping softly. She froze, listening. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, not urgent, just persistent. When she finally approached, peering through the rain-streaked glass, nothing, just the yard, sodden and empty, the creek murmuring in the distance. Emily returned as the storm eased, bringing takeout from the diner, burgers and fries, grease spotting the bag. They ate in the kitchen, the radio tuned low to local news, weather updates, a reminder for the town meeting. Conversations skirted the edges. Sarah mentioned the blue car vaguely. Emily shrugged it off as a neighbour's. But as night crept in, the unease thickened, the house filling with shadows that seemed to shift when unobserved. Upstairs, Sarah lay awake, the rain a steady drum on the roof. The murmurs returned, softer this time, weaving through the walls like threads of conversation meant for her ears alone. Not words she could catch, just the cadence of voices overlapping, patient, as if the town were confiding its secrets one breath at a time. She pulled the quilt tighter, wondering how long she could ignore the pull. The way Willow Creek seemed to breathe in sync with her doubts, waiting for the moment she'd listen back. The rain had cleared by morning, leaving the air scrubbed clean and the streets glistening under a pale sun. Sarah woke with a start, the quilt damp from her restless turning, the murmurs from the night echoing in her ears like a half-forgotten radio station. She lay still, listening to the house's quiet, no footsteps, no voices, just the drip of water from the eaves outside her window. The clock read 7:42 a.m. Earlier than she'd planned, but sleep had become a fragile thing, interrupted by the town's invisible pulse. Downstairs, Emily was already at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea, her eyes fixed on the backyard, where puddles dotted the grass. She looked up as Sarah entered, her expression soft but distant, like someone reciting a familiar role. "Slept okay?" Emily asked, though it sounded more like an invitation to confirm than a genuine question. Sarah nodded, pouring coffee into her mug. The steam rose, carrying the familiar bitter scent, but today it felt like a veil between them. Those sounds last night, the murmurs, you hear them too? She kept her voice even, testing, as she slid into the chair across from her sister. Emily's fingers tightened around her cup just for a second before she set it down. Old house, wind through the vents, maybe the creek settling after the rain. Willow Creek's full of echoes like that. She stood, rinsing her mug in the sink, her back turned. I've got the afternoon off. We could drive out to the old mill site. Clear your head. Sarah watched her, the way Emily's shoulders held a subtle tension, as if carrying the weight of unspoken words. The invitation felt like a deflection, but she agreed, needing to move, to chase away the stagnation settling in her bones. They spent the morning in quiet chores. Sarah folding laundry in the living room, Emily weeding the garden out front. Through the window, neighbours passed on foot. Mrs. Ellis walking her terrier, the mailman stuffing boxes with deliberate care. Each one glanced at the house, a brief acknowledgement that lingered in Sarah's mind like fingerprints on glass. By early afternoon, they were in Emily's car, the engine humming as they left the suburban loop behind. The road wound out of town, flanked by fields of corn stubble and distant silos standing like sentinels. Willow Creek's edges blurred into rural quiet, the kind of landscape where cell signals faded and conversations turned inward. Emily drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift, her gaze fixed ahead. "Remember coming here as kids?" she said after a stretch of silence. "Dad would pack sandwiches, tell us stories about the workers who built the place back in the 20s. Sarah stared out at the passing trees, their branches arching like empty frames. Yeah, ghost stories mostly. The mill shutting down after the flood. Everyone scattering. She paused, the words hanging. Town's always had that quiet about it, like it's listening more than talking. Emily's laugh was light, almost forced. That's just small-town life. Folks here keep to themselves, respect the space. But her knuckles whitened on the wheel, and she turned up the radio to fill the gap, static-laced country tunes drifting through the speakers. The mill site appeared around a bend, a skeletal ruin of brick and rusted beams overgrown with vines, the creek murmuring below like a secret keeper. They parked on the gravel pull-off, the only car in sight, and walked the overgrown path to the water's edge. The air was cooler here, laced with damp earth and decay, the ruins casting jagged shadows across the ground. Sarah picked up a flat stone, skipping it across the surface, 3 bounces before it sank. Emily joined her, but her throws were half-hearted, stones plopping straight down. As they sat on a weathered log, the conversation circled back, inevitable as the current. "That genealogy book," Sarah said, her voice low against the water's rush. "The entry for me, dated ahead, like I was already back. And the yearbook, the banners. It's like the town's been preparing." Emily didn't meet her eyes, focusing on a leaf floating by. Records get updated, anticipatory they call it, for folks who belong here. She hesitated, then added, "You do belong, Sarah, always have. That's why they watch out." The words landed softly, but they stirred something deep, a realization uncoiling in Sarah's chest. Watch out. Not watched, but watched out for. Like a collective vigilance, the town's silence a form of care, woven into every glance, every paused conversation. She thought of the diner sign, the pickup's nod, the library's lingering looks. Not suspicion, but inclusion, a quiet net drawing her in before she'd even asked. "But why not say it?" Sarah pressed, her voice gaining an edge. "The whispers, the car in the driveway, it's like everyone's in on something, and I'm the last to know." Emily turned then, her face pale in the dappled light, eyes reflecting the creek's shimmer. "Because saying it breaks the quiet. Willow Creek's built on that, holding space for what's unsaid. People leave, come back, carry pieces of us all. We don't pry, we just remember. She reached out, touching Sarah's arm lightly. You've been gone, but we never forgot. The town didn't either. Sarah pulled back, the touch feeling like a tether. In that moment, the pieces aligned. The future entry wasn't a mistake, but a welcome etched in advance. The murmurs not hauntings, but echoes of lives intertwined. The blue car, a neighbor's quiet check-in. The town knew her name because it had never let it go. Its silence a blanket of awareness, enveloping returns like hers, in a rhythm older than memory. It wasn't malice or mystery solved. It was belonging, insistent and unseen, pressing against the edges of her isolation. They drove back as the sun dipped, the fields glowing gold. Dinner was simple. Soup from a can, eaten at the table with the radio murmuring weather reports. Emily retired early, leaving Sarah alone with the fading light. She wandered the house, touching familiar objects, the mantel clock ticking steadily, the photo frames on the stairs. Outside, the streetlights hummed to life, casting their pools on the lawn. In bed, the night unfolded without sounds, no footsteps, no voices, just a profound stillness, as if the town had exhaled, content. Sarah stared at the ceiling, the weight of it all settling not as fear, but as a subtle pull, drawing her deeper into the quiet. She could leave tomorrow, chase the city again, but Willow Creek's silence whispered otherwise, a promise that names like hers were never truly forgotten. As sleep came, she wondered if the echoes would follow, or if she'd finally learned to listen, blending into the hush that held them all. The house breathed with her, the town just beyond, waiting in its patient, unspoken way.